Hello, everyone. I don't know if you can hear us or see us, but please feel free to put a message in the chat. I have actually enabled at the moment your cameras and your microphones. I might switch you off, but you never know. We might turn it back on depending on how many people we get in here. I noticed. Hi, Vanessa.
A few people. Yay.
Yeah. There's Melissa's typing. That's great. Hello, Melissa. I've known Melissa since she was a child. Isn't that sad for Melissa?
Poor Melissa.
I was president of the P&C that she went to school at for a little while. It was actually her mother that nominated me as president, believe it or not. But we won't hold that against you, Melissa. Oh, now you're making me feel old, Mrs. Booth.
This Mrs. Booth business.
Ah, dear. Excellent. And M, all we've got is your initial M. So perhaps you can tell us what your name is rather than just your initial, just so that we can refer to you as someone other than M, because that sounds like a James Bond movie. All right. Now got Gemma on as well. Gemma's from down Bunbury Way. We might actually make a start, and people who come along, they can sort of catch up. What we will actually do is send out, that's okay. We will actually send out the slides, copies of the slides later, and we are actually recording. So just be a little bit careful about what you say. I'll make sure that I make sure I say nice things about people like Melissa that I've known forever. And we've got John on, I notice, who's been to conference a few times, and we've got quite a few people that we've met before, which is lovely. Okay, so I'd like to first of all introduce myself. I'm Debbie. I'm one of the training officers at WAXO. I tend to do the country training, which is why I'll be coming out to people like Gemma at some point soon. We've also got Tracy. You can see her camera is on. Tracy is our Metropolitan trainer, I should say, not a counsellor, who does the Metropolitan training. And so if you hold a training session in the metro areas, Tracy's likely to be the one that comes out. We've also got Julie on. She's actually hasn't got her camera on, but that's all okay. She is the state councillor for the Great Southern and also our senior vice president. So it's nice to have her along to sort of keep Tracy and I in line, I guess. Now, I'm assuming that you can all see the slides, and as we're going along, please ask questions via the chat. I may not be able to answer them immediately, and it may be that I see your question and I'll actually answer a little bit further down the line. So let's make a start. So, as I said, please type questions into the chat function. I will try and address them as we go, and we will stop and try and have questions at the midpoint and at the end. This is mostly about AGM, but if we have time at the end and you've got questions, please feel free to ask. So what we're going to cover today about the AGM, the purpose of the AGM, what you can do before the AGM, the agenda and the post-AGM actions that you need to take, as well as some handover tips. Now, the other thing is I've got a cold and sometimes we'll have to stop and cough, which I'm about to do now, excuse me. And if I have to keep coughing, I may have to hand over to Tracy. Okay, so the annual general meeting, that is actually just a type of general meeting. So the same rules apply to your annual general meeting that would apply to your general meeting. Things like a minimum of 7 days notice to all your members, the quorum, all that kind of thing. The only difference is that there's extra things that are presented, which is what we will go through today. So the things that you need to go through are your presentation of your annual financial statements, or if you decide to, a review or audit of your financials, as well as your solvency statement. So assuming that most P&Cs turn over less than $500,000 a year, that makes you, according to the Associations and Corporations Act, that's what this AIA 2015 stands for, you're a Tier 1 association, which means the minimum requirements that you have is to present your annual financial statement to your AGM. We, as WAXO, recommend that you at least do a review. Excuse me for a minute. we recommend that you at least do a review of your books, and it could be an informal review where you get somebody who's got a bit of an idea about finance to have a look over your books. And it can be things like, okay, we realise that you've included the ex-GST amount there, whereas it should be the including GST amount, or that you're not paying superannuation to your employees, that kind of thing. If you are turning over more than $500,000 a year, you actually end up in the next tier, and then you have to have either a formal review or a formal audit, depending on where you're at. There are certain qualifications of the person that's doing that, and there are certain standards that they have to abide by as well. So that then takes that additional step upwards. You also have to produce a solvency statement, which is basically a statement saying that the P&C can pay their bills as and when they're due. But we'll talk about that shortly too. We also present the non-financial reports, and whereas normally you would probably present reports that are from the previous general meeting to the current general meeting, these reports would actually be for the full year. You also have your elections of your office bearers, executive committee members, subcommittee members, all that kind of thing. Any appointments that you need to make. If you decide to have an audit, for instance, then you would actually have that audit. That's at that point is when you appoint them. Then you can have some general business. Now, a lot of P&Cs think they need to actually close their AGM once they've had their elections, etc., and then open a new general meeting to do any standard business that you might have, whether it's to do with running your canteen or your uniform shop or fundraising. You don't actually need to do that. And in fact, that is counterintuitive, because as soon as your AGM closes, the new office bearers take their positions up. And so all of a sudden, it's the new office bearers that would need to actually, for instance, chair the meeting. The treasurer would be expected to present a treasurer's report, which obviously they're not going to be able to do. So in that general business period, you can actually include any general business that you might have as a P&C. The AGM is also a really good opportunity to attract new members. Hopefully when you're getting your AGM organised, you're actually really promoting the P&C about the benefits that it has to the school and about the benefits that it has to your members, because when I joined my P&C, I learned so much that actually helped me in my professional career. It taught me how to interact with people, how to hold meetings, all that kind of thing. As it turned out, I ended up working for Waxo, which was an added bonus, but it does actually, you do actually have those development opportunities. So sell it that way. And make sure when you're talking to potential new members that they understand that they don't have to accept a nomination if it comes up. So before your AGM, I love this quote: by failing to prepare, you are preparing to fail. So the idea here, the intent here is that if you prepare well for your AGM, it's going to go well. So you need to make sure that you're on the front foot with getting all those reports and everything organised quickly. And if you send those reports out beforehand, then people don't have to read them at the actual AGM, and it makes your AGM flow so much better. Please excuse my voice. Okay, here we're talking about an executive committee meeting that you might want to hold prior to the AGM. This is not a requirement. This is just something that we have found makes your AGM run much smoother. So at this executive committee meeting, you would want to talk about what the other executive members' plans are. Are you aware if the president, the vice president, secretary, treasurer are planning to renominate? If they're not planning to renominate, you might want to start doing some recruitment. You may find that everybody's happy to stay. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to get voted in, but it's a good idea to know where you're at. You need to plan the AGM. Obviously, you need things like date, time, notice, financial motions and marketing. So as any general meeting, you need to give a minimum of 7 days notice. Obviously, because it's an important meeting, you actually want to give a little bit more and have plenty of time to promote. You also need to make sure that if you are going to carry any financial motions, that you've given that 7 days notice of those financial motions. And marketing. You can do it through, the marketing can be through a Facebook page or through the school newsletter or flyers that you put up around the place, but really make sure you try and encourage new people to attend. So at this executive committee meeting, you want to bring all the up-to-date and accurate financial documents to give you the chance to review it before you put it to the AGM. So you would have at that point the financial statements for the whole financial year that's just finished. Most P&Cs have their financial year as being the 1st of January to the 31st of December. So normally your AGM is held around about now. It must be held within 4 months of the end of your financial year. So if your financial year is the calendar year, then you need to have your AGM by the 30th of April. So you'll have all that information. Hopefully you've had time to get it reviewed or audited, whatever the P&C decides to do. Something I neglected to mention previously was you don't have to get your books audited or formally reviewed, but if the P&C decides that's what they want, then yes, you do. So it's up to the P&C to make that call. But presentation of those documents is the minimum. An important thing is the solvency declaration. This is a motion for the President to sign on behalf of the Executive Committee. It doesn't have to happen at this Executive Committee meeting. It can happen as part of the AGM, but having it here gives the Executive Committee to look over the reports and say, well, I'm not 100% sure of this, so therefore chances are, and our financial members will have the same question, let's make sure we're aware of where everything stands. And if you decide that you do want to go with having a formal review or an audit, make sure that you've done your research and got some quotes so that you know how much it's going to cost you, because you put the motion forward for an auditor or a reviewer at your AGM. So your solvency statement. Okay, this is a really, really important thing, and it's part of the current Constitution and the Associations and Corporations Act. This is a way of saying the P&C believes that they will be able to pay their bills as and when they fall due. As an incorporated body, you guys are actually protected as individuals if something goes wrong. So if the P&C goes bust, for instance, you're not going to be expected, provided you abided by the rules, you're not going to be expected to throw the money in to cover that. If you continue to trade while insolvent, that is one of the few things that you could actually end up finding yourself in a bit of a hole about. So the idea being, you've got to make sure that you've got enough assets to cover all your debts, and then you're sweet. It's all good. This solvency statement declaration is part of the P&C handbook that was posted to all P&Cs in week 1. It's also downloadable from our website, both the statement itself and the handbook if you haven't received it. If you haven't received your P&C handbook, we've had a few people asking about this. It gets sent to the school, so it may be that the school just hasn't passed it along. If you haven't received it, please go and speak to the school. If you if they haven't received it, please let us know, and we can send you a new one, or you can download it. So at the Executive Committee member meeting, prior to the AGM, what are you going to do? You're going to prepare the agenda, and then you need to promote that agenda. One of the best things you can do to promote people coming onto your P&C is talk about what you've accomplished. People see that, oh, I've got to go and turn sausages out of sausage sizzle, but maybe they don't realise that particular science equipment that was purchased for the school was the result of people getting in there and turning those sausages. So please promote what you've done. You may also want to ask for a wish list from the principal or the school staff. It's actually a really good idea to put the onus on them to tell the P&C what it is that they find is the priorities for their school this year. What you think and what I think might be the priorities for the school will be potentially quite different to what the school suggests. By making sure that it comes as a wish list from the from the principal, it means that you can be sure that it's not just one staff member that wants to put their hand up and want potentially frivolous things just for their classroom. Hopefully, the school staff have got together and decided on what it is that they see as the priorities. The other thing that you can prepare is a calendar of your annual events. It's only a draft because the P&C can actually overturn that calendar. They may decide that they don't want to hold a fete, or they don't want to hold a sausage sizzle, or they want to hold it at a different particular time. That's up to the P&C. You also want to look at any financial motions that you might like to present, and we will talk about a couple of those shortly, and also review the terms of reference for your subcommittees. As I'm sure you're all aware, no one member of the P&C can take action on their own, and every single decision that you make needs to happen by the P&C, either at a general meeting or an executive committee meeting. If you've got something like a canteen or a uniform shop running, quite often that means that you'll end up with lots of little tiny motions about buying a loaf of bread or whatever it might be happening at your P&C. That's a waste of time. So that's when you have these subcommittees. In order for them to be able to make decisions, they need terms of reference, which is a bit like a delegation of authority, to say, yes, you can make decisions to spend up to, and these are just examples, $400 a fortnight in the supermarket, $600 per fortnight with these particular suppliers, all those kinds of things. So make sure that the terms of reference that you're putting forward are still current and still applicable. If you want sample terms of reference, they are available on our website. So send out the agenda. Make sure that you send out a written notice of meeting. It doesn't have to be on pen and paper. Whatever way that you normally communicate with your members, you do it that way. So it might be via the school newsletter. It might be an email. And it doesn't have to be a bit of paper that the kid puts in their school bag and completely forgets about. As part of that, as part of the agenda, send out any written and financial motions, any financial motions and any written reports. It gives people the opportunity to review them before the meeting, and it means that the meetings happen much faster. Include in that things like we're going to have elections, or the office bearers, or the executive committee members, subcommittee members, all those sorts of things are appointments and elections that we'll be needing to do, including appointment of an auditor or reviewer if that's what you want. Also include in there any general business financial motions, because you need to give 7 days notice of every financial motion. And include the sample terms of reference ready for discussion by the P&C. On the day of the meeting, but before you actually start the meeting, make sure that you have all the forms ready. You need to have an attendance register. You need to be able to keep track of who actually attended that AGM. You need to have membership forms, office bearer and executive committee nomination forms, and copies of or links to your P&C constitution. Your P&C constitution is your initial set of rules that you need to abide by. It's a standard constitution that's been developed by WAXO in conjunction with the associations, incorporations, administrators, as well as the education department. The only thing that changes between our constitutions for all the P&Cs is the name of the constitution and what your financial year is. So make sure that you've got a copy of that ready to give out to people. It is the right of members to have a copy of that. Our Effective P&C Association Guide, so that's that picture that's on the right there, that is actually a document that you can either get a hard copy of or you can download from our website. Hopefully, you will get more than one person nominate for positions. That's obviously the ideal. In that case, you need to go to a ballot. So make sure that you've got slips of paper that you can use to have a ballot if needed. When it needed, let's be positive, when you need it. All of these forms, so you can see there's a P&C membership form and the P&C office bearer and executive committee nomination form. All of those are part of the P&C handbook that was posted out, or you can download them from our website. And again, the register of members and the record of office bearers, again, available to download. So at the meeting, assuming that you've got a quorum, yay, it's important to note that people take on the new positions, their new roles at the rise of the meeting. So if you think about, I don't know how many of you have been to conference, but we use formal standing orders and rules of debate. That means that the debate is controlled, and part of that is, as standing orders, you literally stand to speak. When we rise from the meeting, we all stand and go home. So that's at the end of the meeting. So the rise of the meeting is when the people take on their new roles. So at the start of your meeting, you've got your standard agenda format, but you've got the additional the additions that occur as part of your AGM. Remind people to see the secretary to become members. So you have to be a financial member of the P&C to be able to become an office bearer and to vote, which means paying your membership fee, which is up to $1. Excuse me for just a minute. It's important to remind people about the office bearer and executive committee nomination forms and the disclosure that goes along with that. So to be able to be on the executive committee, you need to be able to say that you haven't been convicted of certain crimes, particularly things to do with fraud. All that information is available in your constitution. There is a declaration of conflict of interest statement that should be made at every meeting, and I will get to that in a little while. You need to check for a quorum and open the meeting. So the quorum for what we call a large school is 8. So if you've got more than 200 students at your school, then the quorum, the minimum number of people at a meeting for it to be valid, the quorum is 8. If you're a small school, which is 200 students or less, the quorum is 5. When you open the meeting, you start with a very brief outline of the agenda. You talk about how we're going to handle the meeting, the rules that we're going to abide by, and what is going to be covered during that time. And give an expected finish time. One of my recommendations about effective meetings is to always make sure that you have a finish time and stick to it. Otherwise, people aren't going to come to your meetings. If you've got a finish time and it's getting towards that time and you're still only halfway through your agenda, you can actually then start to make people move along a little bit, and they will actually hopefully not waffle on quite so much. See, we've got an expected finish time of, 8:30, so I'll make sure that I don't waffle too much. Okay, your declaration of conflict of interest statement. So one of the things that you might include, and you can actually include this wording in your agenda. In fact, I would recommend it. If any member has a real, potential, or perceived material personal interest in any matter on the agenda or raised during the course of the meeting, please make sure that that interest is known to the secretary now or when the matter is raised. Our P&C might be trying to get some sort of electrical work done, for instance, and somebody might put forward that we use XYZ electrical company, assuming that everybody knows that that's also my partner's business. Not everybody knows that. And by putting it in the minutes, it means that it shows that you've discussed and you're aware of that conflict of interest. And you've got the opportunity to vote against it based on that conflict of interest if needed. Generally, with the conflict of interest, we suggest that the person with the conflict of interest removes themselves from the room, and they certainly don't vote on the matter. All right, so the agenda. Now, interestingly, the only person that must produce a written report for P&C meetings, and that includes the AGM, is the Treasurer. So although we say the President's report, which would be, look at the amazing things that we've accomplished this year, look at how much we've raised for the school, look at how much we've done for the school, look at the advocacy that we've done throughout the year. All those kinds of things would become part of the President's report. All that gets included in the minutes, so it's a historical record of your association. Then we have the financial reports. Now, these are the really important ones. These are the requirements. And excuse me, I need to cough. So in those financial reports are the solvency statement, so that declaration that we've spoken about already, the annual financial statements, so that is the transactions, the profit and loss, that kind of thing that covers the whole year. If they've been audited, you would actually call them audited annual financial statements. If they've been reviewed, you'd call them reviewed annual financial statements. And then if you decide that you want to have for the following year, the financials reviewed or audit. Okay, so there's the report, but at this point too, you would actually move who you would want as your auditor or reviewer, excuse me. At that point, then you can include your subcommittee reports and your principals report. And again, it's for the whole year. And all those reports are either adopted or received. The financial reports, you need to make sure that they're actually adopted because they are the important ones. And you need to bear in mind as a member, Once you adopt a financial report, you're saying that you agree with the contents of the report. So if you don't understand, if you don't think it's correct, it is your responsibility to speak up and ask questions about it. And if you don't agree with the contents, vote against it. It's not a personal attack on the author of the report by any means. It's just a way of saying, I need more information. And you can actually ask, you could move a motion potentially saying, I would like more information on the transaction that was to spend money on XYZ. So when it comes to elections, you declare all the positions vacant. Make sure that you explain the whole procedure. You're going to declare the positions vacant. You're going to take nominations. If there's only one nomination, you then declare that that person is elected unopposed. If you do have more than one, yay, that's when you'll go to a ballot. You can also, if you get onto our website, you can see that we've got these one-page summaries. It's almost like a job description of each of the positions. Have them ready to go. Ideally, send them out beforehand so people can see what's involved. But we also have the President, Secretary, Treasurer guides that you can download and people can view those so that they understand what they're getting themselves into. And potentially, before you actually even get to this point, you could recommend that people do WAXO training because WAXO have the best trainers ever, don't they, Tracy? So the election process, you can appoint returning officers if you want. If you think that there's going to be a lot of multiple nominations for positions, it might pay to have a returning officer. That is someone that's independent that can count the votes and make sure that they've been appropriately handled. Some people will use the principal if they're prepared to do that, or it can be someone else that's independent. You can accept nominations beforehand or from the floor and hold each election separately. Don't rush them. So particularly with the president's role, always have them first, because if somebody nominates as president and they don't get elected, they may then want to nominate as vice president. So if you did vice president first, for example, once somebody's nominated as vice president, they can't actually nominate as president because they can't hold two roles. Give people the opportunity to speak about why they think they would be good at the roles. And it may be that they're just the only person that wants to put their hand up, but it could also be that they've got a good background, for instance, an accountant becoming the treasurer. So the order that you'd normally elect people is you got your president, vice president, secretary, and treasurer. Then you need to nominate your executive committee. So if you've got a small school, you must have a minimum of 2 other people in addition to the office bearers who are willing to step up to the executive committee. If you're a large school, more than 200 students, it has to be an additional 3. They're minimums. You can have as many as you want, but bear in mind if you do call an executive committee meeting, you then need to notify every single member. So it can become unworkable if you've got too many. But by having a few more, it means you've got more chance of getting a quorum if you have an executive committee meeting. At this point too, you would nominate other positions. So for instance, if people want to be on the canteen subcommittee or the uniform subcommittee, you can then nominate them for that. You can also nominate coordinators if you've got a canteen coordinator, for instance. If the role of president is contested, it's really, really important that a neutral person chairs the meeting during that election process, just for the time that the president's position is being nominated and elected, just so that there can be no sort of pressure put on anybody by the president who would, if they were chairing the meeting. Again, often it's the principal. If the vice president is not one of the people that's nominated as president, then they could do it. So the election process, you actually don't need to second nominations. I like to see people second nominations because it means that there's a second person that said, yes, I think they'd do a good job. Read out all the nominations, start with the ones that have nominated prior and then go with the people from the floor. And if you've got multiple nominations, you need to go to a ballot. When we're talking about a ballot there, we're talking about a secret ballot. So people literally write a name on a piece of paper and then someone goes away to count them. If you do it by a show of hands, it can be quite uncomfortable. I don't want to know who has voted for me and who hasn't. And the ballot papers are the responsibility of the returning officer. So in a face-to-face meeting, for example, they would normally just destroy the ballot papers. And an election can only be contested at the meeting that the vote has happened. Okay, excuse me for a moment. Here we have a bit of a flow chart. So item 4.1 on the agenda is the election of the president. Do we have any nominations? If we've only got one, Amanda, whoever, is elected to the position of P&C president unopposed. Congratulations. And everybody gives them a clap. If there's more than one, they state that a ballot is required and asks if both parties are still interested. Sometimes people will nominate for a position assuming that nobody else is going to nominate. And so therefore, if somebody else does, they say, great, I'll take a step back and I'll do something else. Sometimes they might pull back. State that each of them will have a minute, could be 2 minutes, it's up to you, to address their qualities about why they think they'd be good at the role. And then the returning officer hands out ballots, or you can do it via an online app. Particularly if you've got a hybrid meeting, you might want to use an online app. The count then happens, and then the result is announced to the chair. If it's a tie, then you literally do it by a ballot. By pulling a lot, I should say, where you pull the name out of a hat. If you had 3 people nominating and the top 2 were a tie, you would then have another election, but have just those 2 people. I hope that makes sense. Makes sense in my head, but the flu might be affecting that. So after that, the chair will say, Amanda is elected as president, congratulations, and then they'll destroy the ballots. So the agenda, the other thing that you've got is the appointments of things like a reviewer or an auditor if required. Ideally, you'll have sent out those quotes and a little bit of information about it beforehand. According to your constitution, your 4 office bearers, president, vice president, secretary and treasurer, are your signatories. So they're all required, but you can have a 5th signatory, which is somebody that is on the executive committee. You need to appoint that person at this point. If you, for instance, have a canteen subcommittee and that particular person is doing a lot of the financial transactions, it might be helpful if they are one of the signatories on the bank account. It used to be back in the day when I was P&C president that everything was done by cheques. So you literally had to be someone available to be able to sign. And so that's why we had 5. We probably don't actually need that these days with the ability to use electronic transfers. But that's your maximum, is those 5. And you can also appoint a delegate for WAXO annual conference. One of the roles of the vice president is the WAXO liaison. So if there's to collect the P&C voice, the e-news, any information that's coming out of WAXO would normally be the vice president's role. And so quite often it would be them that would attend WAXO conference. If any of you have been, I know, looking at the people who have joined, there are a number of you that have been before. It is a fantastic opportunity and people come away feeling quite energised. So if you can attend, it's great. It's over a weekend in August. It's usually around the 17th, 18th, kind of that weekend. Not 100%. I should have looked that up before I came. The conference is amazing if you can come along. If you're remote, we also get, every year so far, we have actually had Lottery West sponsor country people to come along to conference. It covers their travel and accommodation. And I know we've got someone on. Pardon, Tracy?
I was going to say, jumping in there, it's the 23rd, 24th of August this year.
Thank you, Tracy. And I was just going to say, looking at the people that we've got online, I know there's at least one that has been the sponsored delegate before. So the other things that will form part of your agenda in general business are your terms of reference for your subcommittees, and that's a bit like your constitution for your subcommittee. Have a look online. You'll look at your school wish list, and we're not saying that you're going to approve all of them. As much as anything, sometimes things change and the school may decide on something different, but you look at them and it gives you your opportunity to potentially plan what you want to do for the year. which leads into the next dot point there, which is your annual calendar for approval. So that can be things like you're going to hold a sausage sizzle on XYZ date. Bear in mind, you can change your mind later. You just need to rescind your motion. On our website, we have debit card terms of use and procedures. Have a look at those if you decide you want to go down the track of having a debit card. If you've got a canteen supervisor, for instance, that needs to go to the shops to buy bread, I'd say ham, but then you've got to have it with a side of salad, all those kinds of things. Tracy's glaring at me now, it's okay. All those kinds of things, people need to be able to have what used to be cash, but we don't use cash with the P&Cs anymore. You can use those debit cards, follow that procedure, and at this point is when you would actually have your approved users, you'd nominate them. The next thing is this contingency/emergency spending motions. I'm going to talk about that in just a moment. So they're things that you cover in your general business. You can also cover any particular items that have come up since your last meeting if you wish. So this contingency emergency spending motion. Every single motion that you have needs to be approved by the P&C, and when it is a financial motion, you need to give appropriate notice. So if the motion is being presented at a general meeting, you have to give the same amount of notice that you have to give of the meeting. So you have to give 7 days notice of your meeting, so you have to give 7 days notice of that financial motion. For an executive committee meeting, it's 48 hours. So, but you still need to give the specific wording of what you're going to spend the money on. Everybody has to have that amount of notice. That can become quite unworkable if things come up. So what you can do is have what we call a standing motion that up to the next AGM, so here we're talking about for a maximum of a year, the Treasurer and President together have delegated authority to spend up to $200 per event on unforeseen expenses with a motion to retrospectively approve expenditure to be moved at the next general meeting. So what they're saying is if you need to all of a sudden need to spend $120 on fuel to get there or something, at whatever it might be, they can approve that together. Excuse me for a moment. But the critical thing here is that you need to make sure that it gets reported to the next general meeting where it is then carried by a motion. So, as I said before, you have your maximum of 5 signatories. Your office bearers are mandatory, and you can appoint a member of the executive committee to be in that role as well. Bearing in mind that you need at least 2 signatures on any transaction, whether it's a cheque or whether it's an electronic transfer, and you need to make sure that those 2 people don't have a conflict of interest. So, for instance, if you had life partners as president and vice president, you wouldn't get them to sign the same cheques. So any 2, yep, and anyone in a direct relationship must not co-sign the cheques. If you're a payee of that cheque, be really careful about not being the person that signs the cheque. And of course, when I talk about cheque, I also mean funds transfers. So the motion that you need to have for your signatories, and this is because the banks require you to dot every single I, cross every single T, they just need to cover their own rear ends. So the motion is that you put in the person's full legal name and their date of birth as president, and that person and their date of birth as vice president, etc., 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 are the signatories on these bank accounts, and make sure that you list all bank accounts. By having that as part of the minutes of your AGM, that's what you need to take to the bank, along with a copy of your constitution, to be able to change your signatories. Okay, then the motion 2 is an optional one that whoever it is, as executive member of the P&C, is also a signatory. So as you can see, there's the standard wording there. And the third one is that any combination of 2 of the authorised signatories named in the motion above may authorise any transaction on any accounts they are signatories of. That is a way of dotting I's and crossing T's for the bank, even though it's actually in your constitution. So we just include that as a way of sort of not making you have to then go away and get your minutes redone. because the bank insists on it. Then with your agenda, you've got other business, which might include everyday transactions that you might need to do, and set your next meeting date. And then close at your advertised closing time or a bit before. After that point, you might have a little bit of networking, you might have discussions about handover, all that kind of thing, but wait until the meeting's actually closed. And then people who don't want to participate in that can leave. Okay, and then you need to do the following follow-ups. It is a requirement of the Education Act that you notify the principal of all your office bearers. It's a requirement of your constitution that you notify us. You need to notify the ATO, and you need to do your annual information statements. Now, this is Associations Online is if you're registered solely with DMIRS, the Department of Mines, Industry, Resources, whatever they are. They're the ones that administer the Associations and Corporations Act. If you are registered with the ACNC, which is what we recommend, and we're actually going through a bulk registration process at the moment, you don't have to register with, you don't have to do your information statement with Associations Online. And it also means that you don't have to do an annual declaration with the ATO. You still need to notify them who your contacts are, but you don't have to declare that you're not, that you don't have to declare that you're exempt from income tax. So our recommendation is always to be a member of, to be registered with the ACNC, and then you need to do a declaration with them. What you need to do is you need to give them what your financials are and who the contacts are, basically all the information that you give to WAXO. Okay, has anybody got any questions before we sort of talk about P&C handover? You might need to put them in the chat. I haven't seen any in there, so if there aren't any, I'll keep going, but we can ask questions at the end. So one of the most important things that I would be telling people if I was handing over from president to the new president is exactly what it is that WAXO does. So for those of you who don't know, WAXO is the peak body for Parents and Citizens Associations in Western Australia. We're not a governing body. We are here to give you the support to help you run your P&C. We are also there to provide advocacy for P&Cs and education in WA. I'll give you some examples. My favourite one is that a P&C came to us and said people are speeding around schools. So many, many years ago, WAXO lobbied and got the 40km/h zones around schools. We've also had, as part of our advocacy, we've had input into things like disability reviews and all sorts of education department policies. Julie, our Senior Vice President, has been very active in the advocacy role, and it means that WAXO has a voice. So if you have a particular issue, I live in the country, a lot of country schools have issues with the school bus services, and it's happening again, I believe, Julie. And so WAXO has actually lobbied on behalf of P&Cs to get those school buses reinstated to a point where it's the best result for the students. We also offer P&C training. So we actually offer training sessions either online like this one or face-to-face. And so Tracy, as I said, does the metropolitan area. I do the country area, and we come around and we talk about things like what the roles and responsibilities are of your P&C, including your office bearers. We talk about the roles of the office bearers, how to have effective meetings, and quite often it becomes a really good networking opportunity as well. We also have resources available on our website. We've actually got a fairly new website. I hope you've all been on there to have a look. If you are registered with the old website, excuse me for just a sec. If you were registered with the old website and haven't been onto the new one, you do actually need to re-register, but that registration is immediate. So as soon as you've registered, you can actually access all our resources. So on there are things like all the different guides that I've been talking about, our financial literacy program, all sorts of information about how to register for training sessions. I'm assuming because most of you have registered for this, you must have registered for the website to be able to view where the training was. We offer advice, so we quite often have emails to our support hub email address, and we will get back to you on those, or you can give us a ring. And we have our conference, which is in August, which is the 23rd and 24th. Is that what you said, Tracy?
Yeah, I think something like that.
Yep, something like that. It's over a weekend anyway. It's Saturday and Sunday. Last year, we actually had some amazing presenters, and it's well, every year we seem to. It's a great opportunity to network as well. So here we have some templates that you can use. So this is the summary of the association template. This is in your handbook, and you can also download it. On here, what we have is things like who you're banking with, what the bank accounts are, what the passwords are for the generic email accounts, who's got what, all those kinds of things, so that when it gets handed over, then you've got all that information written down. All you have to do is go, here you go. So if you keep that updated, it's a great way of making sure that everybody can access that information if needed. As you can see, there's quite a lot involved in it, but it is a really good resource to use. So that's in the P&C handbook. Take over, for want of a better word, take over as quickly as possible. Take control. As soon as I don't know about you, but as soon as I resigned from being president, I, did a quick handover and then wanted to be basically out the door. Really, you want to be able to take over those roles as soon as you possibly can. Hopefully, you do have that mentorship from the previous person, but really that person probably does not want to really be involved in the day-to-day stuff anymore. So do it as quickly as you can. Organise your next meeting. So organise a meeting between the new and the old office bearers. That's what that one's all about. You also need to organise your next P&C meeting. But if you have a meeting between the existing treasurer and the previous treasurer, it just gives that handover a little bit more substance. According to the Associations and Corporations Act of 2015, it is a legal requirement to hand over all documents of the P&C. And it's also part of your constitution. So if somebody's not handing that information over, you need to make sure that you get it as soon as you can. Update your details with us as soon as you can. You need to also update your principal. On our website, if you do have a login and you go to the member services area, you'll notice that there's an orange box on the right-hand side, and that says update your details here. That way we can contact you when we have important things to send out, training, advocacy, conference, all those kinds of things. Bank signatories are really, really important. Make sure that you get this happening as soon as you can, especially if you've got employees, because it's not fair on them if there's an issue with being paid. Any documents that you have, make sure they get handed over. People these days don't seem to use paper documents, and that's actually something that I would recommend, is that you don't use paper, simply because it's so easy to get lost and you end up with a mountain, you don't look at it again. You can use many of the online storage facilities. Excuse me for just a minute. Things like Google Drive, OneDrive, all that sort of thing. There are some other ones like TidyHQ that you can use. Really important with those to make sure that somebody else at least has the passwords as necessary, but make sure that the access is limited to certain parts of it too. So you want to make sure that once minutes have been accepted, that nobody can get on there and modify them, that people can't just take things off an agenda that you've published. You want to be able to make sure that that is what you sent out. Make sure that any email access has been handed over. A lot of P&Cs have generic email addresses. That's great, but it does need to be handed over. Ditto with any social media accounts. If you have social media accounts, make sure that you've got terms of reference on how to use them, and make sure that you're very, very careful about what can be advertised or posted on your social media sites, because you are effectively the publisher and you could be held accountable, and you don't want it to ruin your reputation. So if you do have social media accounts, make sure that you moderate it really carefully. Either people aren't allowed to post until it's been approved, or you've got somebody that's keeping an eye on that to make sure that nothing inappropriate is posted. And don't allow people to post anonymously. There's no reason why they need to post anonymously. If they've got an issue, ask them to email or contact, phone, whatever it might be, members of your P&C. The problem with anonymous accounts is that you can't verify that what they're telling you is true, especially if it's a complaint. People, if people have to put their names to something, they're a lot more careful about what they put on these kinds of things. Okay, we've gone that through like a train. Is there any questions that anybody has got? Feel free to put them in the chat, or I can actually, if you put your hand up, if you raise your hand, you can actually, I can actually undo your microphone for you. No questions. If you learn nothing else today, one of the things that I would like you to learn is that WAXO is here to support you. You guys do an amazing job as volunteers. And I understand that as volunteers, it does cost you in both time and money to do what you do for our children. And let's face it, there's nothing better than being able to help our children through their education. So please, if you have any questions, that's what we're here for. Please use us. So if you've got questions, you can email Tracy and I. We have a joint email account that's training@waxo, or you can go onto our website. You've also got on there contacts for all the counsellors, including Julie, our Senior Vice President, who's on today. And I noticed that Michelle, our Executive Officer, is also on today, which is lovely to see. She's judging us, Tracy. We're in trouble now. So please feel free to contact us. Please take advantage of the free training. We do have the online version as well as the face-to-face. It's what we're here for. Please take advantage. And please keep in touch with your state councillor. When you go onto the website, you will actually see who is your state councillor. If it's vacant and you've got some interest in nominating as a state councillor, that is actually in the process of, we're actually in nomination mode at the moment. So you can contact us and we can talk you through what the role involves. Okay, so we might leave it there. Thank you very much for your time, everybody. And as I said, please keep in touch. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you, everyone.
Go on, Tracy. Yep.
Melissa, are you trying to write something there? We've got movement in the chat.
Oh, hooray.
Oh,
okay, thanks, Caddy. I'm glad you managed to get on, Caddy. Yeah, I've had chats with Caddy today. It's okay.
Nothing else?
Okay, we have people wanting to join this year, taking their membership now is for the 2025 year. Yes. So, Melissa, assuming that your financial year is the calendar year, which is what normally is the case with P&Cs. It is great. Okay, so yes, your membership is from AGM to AGM. So you can join earlier in the year, but it's only until the next AGM. So if someone were to join today, they would be there until that week 7 when your AGM is, and then they'd join again, and they would be a member until the end of the next AGM. And given that the membership fee is a maximum of $1, hopefully they'll be able to cover that. So yes, it's from AGM to AGM, as is the nominations for, as is the office bearer roles. It's always nomination AGM to AGM. No problem at all. Thank you, Melissa. Okay, we might close the chat now if there's nobody else that's going to add something. If anybody would like to add something, please start typing quickly. Otherwise, we will cut it off at that point. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending. Have a great evening. Well, hopefully we'll catch up with you at a training session soon. Thank you all. Bye.
Thank you.